Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Terry Lee, pure visionary, psychic medium. And if you're just dropping into this series, you are going to be in for an excellent adventure. And if you're a subscriber and you've come to join us again, I love you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. I have a very special treat for you today. My special guest today on Walking in Two Worlds is John Vliet. John Vliet, do you go as a psychic medium or just medium?
Well, I do both, so I could go by both, sure.
Okay, so I'm going to say it again. Psychic medium John Vliet. And I wish honestly that you could have been in on the conversation before we got into a really great conversation right before the show went live. So the flow is going, the information is flowing, and we're really going to have a good time. I want to say hi to Terry and Starfish, and hey, and Janet. Hi, Janet. Thank you for joining us. I want to give a brief statement of intention that I always do at the beginning of this show. It sort of explains what it's about. And I know some of you, in fact, probably all three of you, have heard this before. But for the purposes of those who will watch this show after it's live and posted, I'm going to read the intention of walking in two worlds. Walking in two worlds is an honest and open conversation between two psychic mediums about life experiences in their journey to becoming a psychic medium, as well as experiences after dedicating themselves as a professional psychic medium. Truly, we walk in two worlds. It is adventurous and wild at times, but always deeply meaningful and an honor to be a vessel for source energy, a journey for which we will be eternally grateful. Later on in the show, we will take questions from the chat regarding psychic experiences you may have had, or questions regarding becoming a professional psychic medium, or how can you use psychic medium skills to enrich your life. We will not do mediumship readings on this particular show as we do those on other shows. So there it is. And now, John, if I may, I'm going to do a brief introduction of you. Not too much information, though, because we want you to share it with us personally. John studied at his local spiritualist church in a development circle, numerous online development circles, as well as online studies with spiritualist medium Martin Twycross of the UK. And here in the US with psychic and medium James Van Praagh. Martin teaches the mechanics of mediumship. James teaches techniques to feel our way into conversing with those in spirit. And later on, I'm going to be asking John to talk about his skill in psychometry, and we'll learn about that later. All right, John, welcome, welcome. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
to
Glad
share
to be
you with
here.
everyone. I'm going to take a brief pop over and say hi to Lauren, and welcome to the show, Lauren. So glad you could join us. I will be taking questions for the show, questions later. So please put those in capitals so that I can see them and we'll refer back to those. Okay. Now I can relax. All the business is done.
Okay.
John, would you like to maybe give us a brief description of the experience you had and the age you were when you began to have experiences from those on the other side?
Oh, well, I'd go back to, I think I was 15 or so when I had an out of body experience.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
what interests me is I studied with James Van Praagh, and he tripped into the experience in the same way. We both had food poisoning, became deathly ill,
Wow.
which I thought was
Not know
quite
that.
odd. It seemed,
Yeah.
not too dramatic. But yeah, there was a sense of leaving the body, going into space, um, and understanding something about a universal law of vibration there.
Hmm.
Um, I have no idea how long it lasted. Might have been 30 minutes. It might have been 10. I don't know. And I didn't speak of it to anyone for 6 years after that. I was a very
Okay.
inward kid, and there was
Yeah.
no one to tell about something like that. I was afraid they'd think that I was going nuts.
Hmm.
And
I can relate
and
to that.
that yeah, that was in
Yeah.
the late 70s, early 80s, and we didn't have all the books that we have out now about these things. It would have been so great at that time in my life to have had an older person who could have explained that I was on a particular sort of journey, that they could recognize that, but there were no adults like that in my life. So it was buried for years and years and years. And it's a different world now with the internet, where we can Google symptoms and find out we're mediums in 15 minutes.
Yes, it's wonderful. And we talked about this in other shows about later on in the 80s, I would go into the library and look specifically for psychic mediumship books and information on that. Later on, it did start to appear, but just in little bits and pieces, But I was always fascinated with Edgar Cayce. And to me, that sort of started the journey for me to realize, because he went into a trance, how different mediums work and come up with their predictions and their readings in different ways. Fun stuff. I'll ask you another specific question then. What were some of the things, and we talked about your experience, but what were some of the other things that fascinated or interested you as a child or a young person that made you curious about psychic abilities, ESP, or magic?
I can't say that I was especially interested in any of this. When mediumship came to me, it came to me in the 53rd year, and it was a total surprise because I thought mediumship was a TV show. In my earlier years, I remember I had a grandmother who had a book by a woman named Suzanne White called The Complete Astrologer, which combined Eastern and Western astrology into 144 archetypes or signs. And I used to read that when I knew someone's birthday, and I would see how accurate it was. And that struck me as extraordinary. Just extraordinary that somehow in the ethers there was information.
Yes.
And there was no way material science could explain how these numerous constellations of coincidences could come into play and to form these succinct patterns over and over and over again.
Yes.
And I think I stumbled onto Linda Goodman's Love Signs after that, another astrology tome. And I remember reading that, and I didn't understand reading that how a woman who probably was in her 40s or 50s when she wrote it could have accrued that much life experience to understand 12 signs to such a depth. It was not like anything else I'd ever encountered in terms of a type of knowledge. So that was, again, just an eye-opener to me that there are things that we can't explain, but they can be true.
Yes. I always kind of looked at it like secret messages, like breadcrumbs, if you will. I loved reading about astrology as a kid. I always thought it was way too complicated for me to ever understand. But
Me too.
now I have a book called Beginning Astrology by David Pond, and it's so simple and it's really clear, and I'm learning a lot from it. So I'm looking forward to his next book to help me go a little further. But it's working so well with helping me with my readings to know. And in fact, when I did have a reading from James Van Praagh, he asked me my birthday at the beginning of the reading, which I found interesting. And he actually said, and I found it in the recording later, "Oh, you're a medium like me." And it went right over my head because I was so excited to speak to my son. I'm like, yeah, but can you tell me about my son? So it's interesting that he worked that into his reading as well. And I find that fascinating. So there are so many things we can use to come up with particular recipes in particular readings, I think, to get to where we need to be.
Yeah, I talked to Alison Dubois one time, and I asked why she asked for a birth date with a first name at a live reading. And my suspicion was that it was just something, it's like a psychic anchor. It's something that floats in the ethers that has a specific construction. This name with that birth date somehow when we approach information, something that concrete helps lead the way to the source of the information. For
Yes.
me, it's color.
Yes.
I work
Mhm.
with auric color, and names and dates don't do much for me, but color
Mhm.
does quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, that's great. I get colors in my readings too. You know, isn't it fascinating? I mean, when you think about it, a soul coming to the planet at a certain time, and we're able to get that information from astrology and learn more about that particular soul and their life path and sometimes their future. So I just find it so fascinating that we can explore all of these avenues, and I feel like I'll never stop learning, and I'm pretty happy with that.
Me too. Yeah.
Good. All right, let me pick another specific one. Do you want to give us a brief exclamation? Oh, wait, I'll take this one. Um, how was it that you came to know that becoming a professional psychic medium was your desire and your destiny?
Well, when it came into my life, I'd have to say it was incredibly liberating from everything that had felt so stuck for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I came into it late in my 50s. So to walk into a spiritualist church with a bunch of people who were talking about all this woo woo whammy jammy stuff, I didn't feel odd in that context. I was the straight man walking into that context. But the more I listened, the more I had to admit that I had had these same thoughts. I'd had these experiences, and
Mhm.
I'd been quite alone in life. And this was my tribe. And I had given up on the idea of having any kind of tribe, decades before.
Mhm.
Uh, so it is literally a calling, is the simple thing. I
Yes.
mean, at 3:30 a.m. In 2019, I guess, that came on the wall above my bed and it woke me up. And so phenomena is what pulled me into mediumship and awareness of all of this. Um, and the feeling that someone was literally calling my name, I felt like my
Yes.
great aunt was there. I felt like my father was there.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm getting
And
chills.
yeah, so it occurred to me that the idea that someone has a calling was not really a metaphorical device. It was a literal reality. And we've just
Yes.
drifted in so far in this culture from listening to ourselves and from listening to spirit, that it
Yes.
became an anachronism in terms of an
Mhm.
expression for some.
Absolutely. Can I ask you now, when you say you heard them call your name, did you actually hear it, like clairaudience? Did you actually use that, or a combination of both, perhaps?
Now, the knocking was an objective sound. I think anyone could have heard that who was in the
Mhm.
building. But the calling is clairaudient, but it's not objective clairaudience, it's subjective clairaudience. And that would mean that we've got this structure to our ear, and it seems like spirit is able to communicate to us by bypassing the eardrum, going right through the cochlea or whatever it is, to the nerves themselves with the tiny hairs, where
Yes.
it takes spirit the least amount of energy to manipulate the structure of something. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's how they communicate. I do hear it as a word.
Mhm.
Um, and I tend to see words when I hear words. They form in front of my mind's eye.
Okay.
So I would say it was exactly like hearing something, except it did not come through the outer ear.
Oh, it's interesting observation. Clairaudience is actually my most powerful um, part of my readings, and um, it's
Very
interesting.
rare.
I'll see something and I'll be like, okay, am I seeing this? Am I seeing this? And then when I hear something, I know, okay, that's real. It's happening. This is the message. And you're right. It doesn't feel like it's coming through your ears, and yet you actually hear it as if it were. Yeah, that's
Because it does
interesting.
follow the same path through the nervous system.
Wow, that's cool. Thank you for that answer. That's great. Okay, so now I would like to jump to. Would you like to tell us briefly about how you studied briefly about your journey in studying to be a psychic medium?
Sure. Well, it began with the symptoms, the knocking on the wall. I had a headache right here for about 3 weeks. It was mild, but it was noticeable because I never get headaches. That was there, and the feeling that someone was calling me. And I am, from an operating engineer kind of background. I've built houses, I've welded. I am a physical person in terms of construction. So I had to think through what was knocking on my wall. And there was no reason for it whatsoever. It was an interior wall. Nothing could be in it. So I had asked myself, am I going crazy? I'm hearing this knocking. And I mentioned earlier about the Project COPE at Yale, which was studying the difference between mediums and people who have psychosis. Healthy for mediums, not healthy for people who have psychosis, but they have similar things happening. They're both hearing things, but we are utilizing it, whereas they're being tormented by it. Right. So I looked around at my life, Terry, and everything was normal. I was going to work, I was shaving, I was taking the trash out. My relationships were the same. They were as good as ever. So I was sane, and this was really happening. So I did what everyone does now. You just take out the iPhone, you start Googling things. And I Googled hearing a calling, and I Googled pain in the forehead, and I Googled knocking on the wall. And it very quickly led into this sort of funnel of information that led directly to mediumship. And then I just started contacting local mediums to get a reading, to see what was going on, to see if this was really my father or my great aunt. Again, I make it sound easy now, but it was a very difficult idea to accept. Very pragmatic person. I've run a heavy equipment business for like 20 years. This was very out of the ordinary for me. I was not ready to accept this without a lot of skepticism. But long story short, I ended up at the local Spiritualist church. I'm fortunate to have one of the oldest ones in the country, with half hour from me.
I love that.
The minister there sat down. I paid her for an hour reading, and she brought through everyone I knew in spirit, one after the other, in file, tons of evidence for each one of them, understood our relationships, not just mine to them, but them to each other.
That's good.
And I think it took a week to get the appointment, but before I got there, I realized, oh, this is because I am a medium. It was just a knowing. If it's a real thing. And so she proved it was a real thing.
Wow.
And then she invited me to the development class. She read me on Sunday. She invited me for the Thursday. And the first night, I'm sitting there with this group of women in a circle of chairs facing the wall. Someone's supposed to come up behind me, and I'm supposed to read them. And, this isn't like welding or carpentry. There's no pieces to see. I'm like, well, how do you do this? Well, just close your eyes and do it. And I thought, well, this is insane. I can't believe I fell for this. What am I doing here? These people are crazy. This is, how can I get out of here in like a graceful way without looking like a fool? But okay, yeah, I'm here for the next 15 minutes or so. I'll close my eyes and I'll say, okay, I'm going to bring through a spirit, and boom, within 3 seconds of closing my eyes, I saw a man's face, and it was a specific man. There was no generality about it. And I know it's someone I had never seen in my life. I know he was Cape Verdean, because we have some people from that heritage around here, because of the quality of the skin and the undertone, the way it stretches and the nose shape. I knew all of that. He's standing in front of a rowboat, and he's got a big crazy fork in his hand. And I'm telling this to the woman behind me, and I turn around, and she's crying. And it's her friend Bobby. He's never come through before. She had stolen his white rowboat as a teenager. He was terrified she was going to get swept out to sea in this thing, because it was in a protected harbor and she was drifting out. And their passion after that time was going clamming on the clam flats together. That was the big crazy fork, which I didn't understand. So the deal was sealed. The first time I went to a spiritualist church, I could do this. I knew I didn't invent it. The way the images came to me were not from my imagination, because if you'll notice, and it's an important thing for beginning mediums to think about, is our imagination is always comprised of things we have seen before recombined. It's a recycling of images. If
Mhm.
I ask you to see something you've never seen before, you can construct it out of things you've seen before. I
Mhm.
can tell you to picture a pink castle, and you might picture a castle you've seen before, or Walt Disney's.
Mhm.
Um, but the point is you're recombining it. And in mediumship, it shows up on a different screen and you've never seen it
Yes.
before. And there's nothing more telling than a human face because they're as different as can be.
Yes. Wow.
Um, I'm not sure if that's the beginning of the answer for you. I know it would take the whole show to talk about the
Okay.
genesis.
And then you went
From
on.
there, I'll just say that I had money at the time, and I learned
Mhm.
that this could be done online. And I realized I could afford the best teachers available in the world. So I
Right.
went to them one after the other and did
Right.
1 year mentorship programs with one after the other.
So you pursued it. It was now a passion and a pursuit.
Absolutely. I felt like I could not be called to this by accident.
Mhm.
And from what the local mediums were telling me, they've invested a great deal of energy in me if they've
Mhm.
made these things happen. So it was a responsibility of mine to respond to it.
Wow, that's great. You know, I took classes with Medium Kim as my teacher, and you know her well.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a large group of us there. And then we would break out. She would teach us, and then we would break out into little rooms and work with each other on Zoom. And I had my first experience with getting a name and getting a spirit coming in just clear, and it was a beautiful experience to read for that lovely lady. And when we get back from our practices, then we would have kind of a debriefing. And she asked if anybody had an unusual experience, and the lady I read for said, "Yes, Terry read this." And Kim said, "That's really good that you got a name." She said, "That's really good. That doesn't usually happen right away." This was my first class, and I was just like, "Oh, Medium Kim told me." um, you know, she and Susan Lynn were such excellent teachers in taking us through different levels, but comfortably. And they were so encouraging when they would see signs of us getting it. And then they would take us just a little bit further. And so many things that they taught us, and one specifically I just love, and that is say what you see, say what you feel, get it out right away. Don't let your inner dialogue start to tear it apart and try to make sense of it. And just as you said about the boat and the fork, it's like it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's a clear message for them. So
Right.
that's cool.
Yeah,
That's
spirit, the visual language of spirit is incredibly compact, I would say. It's very economical.
uh-huh. Yes. And I love the clues as you get into it more and more. Your guides and spirit knows how to communicate to you with music and songs that take you down the path. So part of it is kind of what you do and know. Like I always get this line sometimes from a David Bowie song: "Walk tall, never look back, walk tall, act fine." And when I'm reading for someone, that will come through and I'll know what kind of a message is about to come out. And I'll give them those lyrics, and it means something to them too. So it's a wonderful thing to share when you're reading someone. And maybe I'll pop into that. Can you explain how you in particular, as we're all different, and that's what this show's about, uniqueness in psychic mediumship, can you explain in particular how you feel the essence of a soul when you are doing a mediumship reading?
I can talk some about it because I mean it varies, of
Sure,
course.
sure.
Um, but one thing I found that I could simulate for people who are not mediums
Mhm.
is to take a D and a C tuning fork and direct them right toward the heart,
Wow.
because you do feel that vibration in the space in front of your heart. I always feel that as a blending is happening.
Mhm.
And it's a way that someone who's not a medium can get a sense of it. And also for people who are training, I think it might help them to actually physically do something like that to them,
It's
because
not
it
a
will
bad
show
idea.
them what to look for. Because really, we want, if we're learning to drive, we want to know what to expect that's coming down the road. And
Yeah.
things like that, physical things like that, could help people.
Mhm.
In the beginning, I'll say, just like for you, they pulled out all the stops. Spirit amps up the feeling. They want you to be a medium, and they work extra hard energetically to make you feel and see everything. So, for instance, the love I would feel in the earlier readings was extraordinary. The peace of death that they would convey was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I just did not want to leave it. It was so extraordinary. And that changes in your mediumship. They work less and less hard on those things because you've incorporated them into your nervous system and the way you process these things in your brain and throughout your body, so that they can give you even more information. They don't have to spend a lot of time on that emotion. It's just a nanosecond, and you want to say, okay, this is love coming, this is regret coming, this is celebration coming. It's very short, but then they tell more of the story. The other thing that I feel strongly is when I do sit down with the sitter and I need to make that heart connection with them. One teacher I had said something that was funny, but it's always stuck with me, is that you do not have to like your sitter, but you must love them.
Yes.
You must love them. That means you must open your heart to them. And I physically feel that when I sit with someone who I can read, I will feel them open up to me, and I have this field about 6 feet all around me, and it feels like it's made of this thin gelatinous material. And that gets penetrated by someone's heart. When we open up, we're allowing the normal defenses to go down. And I feel that move into my heart and then just sort of like open up inside. And it's almost like someone's shining a light inside of me. So that's how I'm blending with their soul. And then I can begin to feel their feelings. I can begin to understand what the day had been like. And I am using color right after that with the aura. So that compounds the information I want to say. Color is, it's a whole subject that's taught unto itself. It's a whole language. It is a personal subjective language, but if you look across the board, I mean, there are many books written about the commonalities of color amongst mediums. Blue is going to have, different meanings for different people, but it is going to be, true blue is going to be there. Depth of thinking, depth of experience is going to be there. There's an earnestness that's going to be there. And pretty much all mediums agree on that about blue.
Yes, I do.
There are 3 million shades of all the colors. So that in context with the color next to it and how it's flashing, vibrating, how solid or thin it is, all of that is an expressive language that's coming from the sitter. And the more you sit with that and the more experience you get reading with that, the more it becomes a knowing, not even a clairvoyant language anymore. It just becomes a knowing. As I said earlier, as we get better at this, the spirit uses, it seems, more and more shorthand.
Right. That's so fascinating, and to go back to Medium Kim, because she was so good to teach us in our beginning that when we meet with the sitter, we blend our auras. And I always love to have a visual with the sitter because I can look at them and just love them and establish that love right away. And then as we do a blending, it's kind of like a prayer or an intention where we blend our auras and we unite heart to heart, mind to mind, spirit to spirit, soul to soul. And usually when I finish saying that, boom, it's seated right here in the core of my being. And it helps me to read, and definitely love is required, has to be.
Yeah, as you say that, it reminds me of an old realization that we have to have a cavity within ourselves. We have to open ourselves to receive love.
Yes, that's
true. If we're not open to it, it just blows right by us, basically. It's like we're these streamlined beings, and everything just goes by us. We have to open ourselves to love. We have to consciously make a space for it.
Yes, we do. Indeed. Okay, well, I'm looking at the time. We're doing pretty good. I'm going to put in a couple more questions, and then we're going to be answering questions later on from the chat. I need some questions, y'all. I only have one right now in the chat that is capitalized, that is about an experience, a mysterious experience, as a matter of fact. I'm looking forward to seeing how we read on this. But also, we're taking questions about, should I be a psychic medium? Hey, I had this thing happen to me. Does that mean maybe I'm a psychic medium? Or if I'm having these things happening to me, do I have to become a professional psychic medium? Those are the kind of questions we're going to be answering today. And I'm terribly sorry we won't be doing mediumship questions. We're going to keep this on the subject of psychic mediumship and questions about the mysterious and the unknown. And we'll be doing other shows, I'm sure, where we do mediumship readings. And of course, you can book a detailed reading with both John and I on our websites, and I will put those in the description. And also, I'll play those on the bottom of the screen at the end of the show. Had to get that little piece of business in. Thank you. I think I want to skip ahead here. Okay, just in our discussions, we've covered a lot of these questions already, and I like that. Yeah. Sorry for the pause. I want to get the right one. Okay. Well, this would be a nice one to lead into the questions that may come. How can spiritual, mystical, or metaphysical practice enrich the life of someone who has no intention of becoming a psychic medium? So, i.e., meditation, yoga, study, grounding, earthing, seeking energy healing, etc.
You know what? I love James Van Praagh's quote, "The price of sensitivity is sensitivity." Yes. Meaning the more sensitive you get, the more sensitive you become. The more spiritualized become, the more you identify with spirit, the more you learn to communicate with spirit, the more you begin to perceive the world around you is a vast series of interconnected energetic systems. And, you know, this, if we look at mediumship as a branch on a tree of shamanism, which goes back much further.
Yes.
Shamans live in an animated universe. And they're right. You know, rocks are moving. They're full of atoms that are spinning. Everything is moving, and there's more space in a solid object than there is solid material. Mm-hmm. So the more we do psychic work, the more we become aware of that energy. The richer life becomes. That's the big answer, actually. Yes. A student at an art school asked a painting professor of mine, you know, the same thing about painting. How does it enrich your life if you're not a professional painter? Well, it makes the world that much more beautiful because you're walking around, you're comparing color, you're admiring the slant of the light, and you're looking at the same scene on your commute every day, but it looks different in different lights. Yes. It conveys different emotions, and the more you feel these things, if you allow them to touch your heart, the more tender your heart becomes, and the more the thinner the kind of cell wall is that surrounds each of us becomes, and we become more transparent to the sort of majesty that is surrounding us. Mm-hmm. You know, Gandhi didn't become Gandhi because he sat down and read a couple books. He, you know, saints become saints because they commit to the spiritual life. And, you know, before mediumship, I used to go to AA, and they talk about spirit at AA, and they talk about soul at AA. And I wonder, what's the difference between spirit and soul? That really bothered me. But they were intellectual ideas to me. You know what I mean? They were abstractions. But when you do this work, the spirit world becomes real. It becomes concrete. It's not an idea anymore. It's our relatives all around us. And if we look beyond the local context of the times that we live in, we look to Asian cultures, we look at shamanic cultures, they all knew this. They all knew this. They all knew this forever. It's only the last 150 years or so that we've drifted away from these things as technology has improved our lives in many ways.
Yes.
But it's also made us focus on labor, on work, on focus on material matters, and we have neglected our spirit selves. So if you pursue this work to any degree, you're going to get in touch with your larger self. And your oldest self is what you're going to feel as your soul. And it is starving for all of this stuff. It's only going to feel better and replenished the more you do this kind of work. And, you know, don't have the lens on the material gain, because it probably is very little for any of us anyway. Just see it as becoming more balanced, I would say, and becoming more in tune with the cycles of life and death. The more you do this work, the less you're going to fear death for yourself or for anyone else.
Yes.
It's peace that comes with it. I think it's the bottom line, peace.
Oh, man. So well said. So well said. I just kind of want to.
Thank you.
Oh, seriously. That's so beautiful. And I think the way that I have tried to describe it on some of my shows is as you raise your vibration. So you wake up in the morning, you have your meditation, you're full of gratitude, gratitude. And then you start to feel that vibration elevating. And then you recognize your aura as you walk. And as like for me, I'll go out in the backyard to feed my birds and my squirrels, right? And as I walk, and I love to do it barefoot. I walk out there to feed them. I feel the buds popping on the trees. I hear those birds singing, and I know their individual songs. I mean, it's like someone pulls the curtains back and said, "Look, it's all here. It's been here this whole time." You know, and my mind is full of appreciation and the understanding of the power of the dimensions that exist all around us. And that's, to me, something that anyone can use. And you can always fall back on it.
That level of calm and excitement, it's a funny combination. It's calm and exciting at the same time.
It is.
It's powerful. And when you get in a group of people who are anxious, you're going to calm them down. They're all going to be looking over at you thinking, why aren't you anxious? Yeah. And you will, like a magnet, calm them down. So it does have a compounding effect on the people around you. Mediumship really changed my family. I was never closeted about it. As it was occurring, I was describing, because I had a very busy life in my work life. I didn't have time to hide things. If things were changing in my life, I just had to tell people why. And I was a little surprised. You know, at the time I worked on the waterfront. You know, if you've seen the Marlon Brando movie with the waterfront, it hasn't changed at all. It's still Roughnecks, you know. But I never hid any of that because I had a lot of credibility there in my position.
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
I was pleasantly surprised how accepting other men were of it. In fact, I think a lot of people looked at me and they couldn't figure me out, what motivated me, because I always seemed a bit distant. But when this came to light, there were a couple of jaws hanging open in the beginning, but then they were like, oh, now we get it. And I think mostly it allayed their fears about whatever the hell else they thought I might have been up to. I don't know what that was. But finally, when you could put a name on it, you say, oh, you know, John's a holy roller or whatever. That made them feel better around me. Yeah. And it made them seek me out because they had many people in spirit.
That's interesting. You know, I remember telling my older sister, she doesn't know exactly what I'm doing, but I described some experiences that I had with reading some past relatives of mine. And I asked her about one of our grandmothers and she told me about it. And then she looks at me and she goes, you know, you're getting even weirder, Terry. This is the weirdest you've ever been. I'm like, oh, good. I'll take it. But that's fine, you know, and some people know exactly what I do and they're supportive and loving and curious. And that's always a treat too. But
you know, as you say that, I'd like to say something else too, because I think your audience is a lot of people who are just coming to mediumship or trying to understand it. And just a general principle about growth in our lives is that we don't do this. We don't just shoot up like that. I remember a therapist explained it to me one time. It was more like the profile of saw teeth. So it goes up and then it falls back, and then it goes up and forward, and then it falls down and back.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there's the other diagram of just the corkscrew, you know. So we'll pass this same point in space, but we're a little higher each time that we come around to it.
I like that.
So don't be scared, and don't be in a hurry. This was told to me by James in the beginning. Enjoy the ride, because this really is about the ride. It is about reaching new plateaus all the time and seeing larger and larger vistas and seeing the world as a more energetic, dynamic place to live. And that is its own reward.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no boredom once you get into this. I don't think.
I like to envision it as, and it was given to me, I believe it was a guide that pointed out to me that everything the creator creates expands. Everything. So I like to picture the universe and just the slow expansion and the Milky Way and just things expanding. And our soul is designed to do the same thing. And that's why we're here. I don't really look at it like I have all these, hard lessons I have to learn. I don't think that's what it's about. It's about that beautiful growth because, excuse me, and the Spirit has reminded me, the Creator delights in everything He creates. Even the little yellow fish 300 miles below the sea in the Mediterranean, a beautiful yellow and purple fish, delights in that. So that's once we develop that love for ourselves and understand that we are loved beyond measure, it's a joyful ride. It can be a joyful ride. Even when there's some bumps, we can still do well and flourish. Okay, I'm getting off the soapbox now. I just want to pop in to the people who are listening. Hi, Kevin's Loving Vibrations. Ellen R. Hi, Amy. I would love to have some questions, but I'm going to pop into this first one because our time is going by as it always does when you're having a beautiful time, right? So the one that I saw, and this is from Starfish, and hi again, Starfish. Nice to see you. You just made a comment. This is definitely not a question, but let's just talk about it because everybody's starting to be very interested in star beings, the meaning of what it means to be a star seed. I truly believe that's part of the expansion that's happening right now in our awareness. So I would love to know, John, what's your thoughts on the fact that Starfish saw a gray guy last night in her third eye?
When she says gray, I take it she means like an alien.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, I can talk a little bit about that. I want to say that at just toward the end of my first year of mediumship, I left mediumship. I was done with it because I was doing a group circle. It was out of Australia, and I brought three murder victims through on two different occasions. And then they were in the paper in Australia the next day. So I was seeing them being killed in real time. That was upsetting, but as someone who is interested in doing forensic work, it's interesting too. But I had a contact, it was gallery style. I'm trying to bring someone through. And I had what I can only describe as something like an alien intelligence come through. And I say that because it was frigid. And there was the feeling that I did not belong. They didn't want me doing this. And all the human warmth that we're used to working with in spirit that drives mediumship was not there. And that scared me, and I left it. And I said, I don't like the ambiguities in mediumship. I don't like that I can't drive it like a car. I can't get specific information in a reading. It's incredibly frustrating. And why is it that way? I thought, I'm going to go work with psychics, professional psychics, military remote viewers who are part of government programs. I found out that I could take their classes as easily as I could take James Van Praagh's. They're expensive, but they're really in depth, and you're working with people who are still doing cutting edge work, working for the government. They would be more rational. And I started reading some of their books. And the first thing I ran into was aliens. Aliens were everywhere within the remote viewing programs of the United States military and the intelligence services. So I just threw my hands up in the air. I said, I just want to be able to look around spirits' bedrooms here. For me, and in answer to the question, I kind of draw a line at anything alien, because for me, as a pragmatic man, mediumship and psychic functioning are such huge topics. I can't barely wrap my arms around them, let alone extraterrestrials. I'm
Gotcha.
very glad that we
Mhm,
finally had some disclosure from the government that admits the existence of these things.
mhm,
But I don't have any direct experience,
mhm.
so I really can't comment on it. You mentioned earlier that the universe is literally expanding, the galaxy is
Yes.
expanding. So the Earth, the sun, the whole system is in a different place in space than it has been before. So who
Yes.
knows what different energies we might be moving through? I
True.
don't know. We could theorize about these things, but I try in my work to be evidential and just
Yes.
empirical. I try to never repeat anything that I have read or seen unless I have experienced it to be true. So I can't comment on those things because I
Sure.
just don't know.
Mhm. That's a great answer. And I do know many psychic mediums who do not want to discuss starved people or aliens or anything of the like. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, we all have things.
We're as a group, we're clinging to credibility, in a public eye that is not always kind. So we're
Mhm.
trying to reduce the number of variables there, I think.
Yes.
And if we can do evidential mediumship, then that is something solid that people can kind of hang their hat on. And
Right.
I think we just need to limit the number of variables for our own credibility as mediums, I think. I mean, you
Mhm.
can do whatever you want, but that's where I'm at with it.
Well, where I'm at with it is I've always been interested in it. I love Charity of the Gods. I follow all of that. I see that there's a lot, speaking of evidence, I believe that the series Ancient Aliens visits lots of places that show us evidence that there have been cultures and things that existed that are quite hard to explain, even with all the information we have today. What I sense, and it's interesting, I have not seen an alien, but I sense a presence. And what I keep hearing is it's about to be revealed. And I feel comfortable with it, not like I used to feel uncomfortable with it, like, oh, but just comfortable. But get ready. This is about to be revealed. And there are reasons for it. And you'll know as the revelation comes about. But I don't chase it, and I certainly don't poo-hoo it. And I know plenty of people in our group that experience regularly things with the people from other planets and other worlds.
Yeah,
Um,
no doubt about it.
yeah, and it's just the way when we talk about guides, I've had people say, what is a guide? When you say this person that spoke to you, and that's a guide of mine. What is that? In a cynical way, and you have to explain it, and it's probably as far out as explaining an alien. Really, I mean, it's it's
Well, no, I take a more empirical approach, and I
okay.
look at the work of someone like I think it's Donald Hoffman,
Hmm.
he writes books about the holographic universe.
Yes.
He wrote a book called The User Illusion, I believe,
Yeah.
and this is how I describe guides to younger people. And that is, James at one point said, start talking to your guides. And at that point, we were sitting in closets for hours. We just clean out a closet in your home, sit in it at night, it's pitch black. The reason you do that is not because you're weird, it's because you want to be able to judge subtle differences in the energy of the space that you're sitting in. So if you're in a small
Excellent.
space,
Yes.
it's easier.
Hmm.
Also, I'm clairvoyant, so if I'm in a dark space, I can actually see things easier.
Hmm.
And for me, the first year was full of light shows. I think I've talked to you about that before. These
Yes.
amoeba, deep sea creature, spaceship looking things that would come almost like floaters on your eyes, but they would approach in space and they would illuminate the inner space. And they all had different personalities, like reading auras. They had their own beat and pulse and whatnot.
Hmm.
And I began to notice certain ones would come at certain times in the process. So I recognize those to be guides. And
Yes.
I would just give them a name. A name would just pop into my head. The first one was Minerva. And she reminded me of the Tinkerbell character on the Disney cartoons that would wave the wand. It was her job to round up spirits when I was going to do readings. Then
Hmm.
I had Henry. He turned out to be an Irish policeman. He one time showed me his belt buckle, and I was able to Google that back to the 1800s. It's a particular town.
Wow.
And then there was Powell, who is a Buddhist monk who looks very much like this man right here.
Okay.
And then my lead guide is a name guy, Abe, and he's come through to other people by name. And he is a 32-year-old hipster. Big tattoos on his arms, big beard, looks bored. It's like a government job. And they're funny. The guides are funny.
They
But what I
are
want to
sassy.
say about them in terms of their user illusion is that they are icons. You know, if you are a Christian, you might see Jesus as a guide. You know, if you're a Buddhist, you might see Buddha. But it's like the male icon on your screen. We touch that icon, and then a gazillion electrons start flying around to bring us all these encoded messages, which then turn into symbols, which we can recognize as letters, which form words, which form language that we can interpret. So we create our guides in the image that we can understand these energies that are affecting us. And you know, our own psyche understands where we need help, and we fill in our screen. Just like we get apps on our phone in our mediumship, we keep adding apps in a sense.
Yes.
We keep adding guides or functions that guides have. And I feel like it's very much the same thing. It is a soul-centered, but it's a psychological process as well. The creation of these screens that we build as mediums that have different functions.
So in your view, do you actually view them as entities, as guides, as people who make an agreement as you come down to be on this planet to assist you?
Well, and there we go to the idea of mythology, right?
Okay.
We're drawing on mythological sources when we see personalities that embody certain energies.
Yes.
You know, Athena is a warrior. Minerva is a warrior princess, yeah? So these are symbols or emblematic of certain energies. So as someone who experiences all of this empirically, I will say, yes, there are streams of energy that come at us, you know, psychic stream. And we can parse that depending on our own intelligence and our sensitivities and the development of our nervous system. And that's why it's all individual for us, because we've all developed these various parts of ourselves that we use that become our clairs differently at different times in our lives.
Yes.
So the song that means something to you, and you can use it over and over again, it is symbolic of many things, probably a whole constellation of feelings and ideas. For me, early on in mediumship, someone on the beach in California was emblematic of a lifestyle, not a location, but a lifestyle that someone in spirit was speaking of. They wanted to become the beach bum and, you know, live in an affluent area. So this is what I mean by that's a symbol. And so I think our guides are symbols as well. And you can feel as attached to them as you want to. I wouldn't try to tell people how they should relate to them. I should just say to the skeptical person that you were speaking of earlier, that the psychological need for symbols when we're doing any kind of operations is there. It's just innate in terms of how we're used to working here in the 3D.
Yes. And it pulls me into the unknown. And I'll share one with you and then I'll get your opinion on it. So I had a dream. I live close to a trail that I've walked for years. It's next to the river. And I had a dream that this guide came to me, very handsome, gray-haired guide in a kind of a cloaky thing. I didn't really associate it with any type of time frame. And he said, I'm here to take you for a walk. And so it was one of those dreams where you're aware it's a dream and you're like, oh my God, this is really cool. He takes me down, and this is in the middle of winter, by the way. And I've always had a fantasy about, wouldn't it be cool to be able to walk about in the winter and with, you know, not our heavy gear and garb that we have to wear on a normal basis, especially where I live in the mountains, and just explore it, you know, comfortably and be able to play in the winter and feel warm still. So that's exactly what happened. He took me down to this trail and I'm walking and I'm like, wow, I don't feel cold. And he's saying, yes, just enjoy it. And he's taking me over and showing me, this part of the river that's broken through and the colors in the ice. And then he takes me down to the end of this trail, which I'm very familiar with. You take a turn and there's a fence post there. And he has a frozen, the dandelions with the little seeds, when it's ready to blow on it. It was frozen. And he holds it up to me and he goes, make a wish. And I was like, wow. And boom, he was gone. But then later on, I was like, who was that? So I sought him out and he told me his name was Herschel and he was going to be my guide for a while. And I absolutely adore Herschel. He gives me so many in-depth thoughts and channeled writings that it's really a relationship. And I have another guide. His name is Elder, and he's the one who lays down the downloads clearly for me in the night or when I'm meditating. So it's just interesting the personalities and the associations and the relationship I'm having with these guys. What do you think of that? Oh.
Well, I often, every medium's readings are different. And lately I've started to call myself something of a Jungian medium because I tend to go right to someone's wound.
Okay.
And then explore their life from there. And, when you look at Jungian psychology, Carl Jung invents the idea of the archetype,
right.
which is, again, it's a symbol of certain constellations of energy. Yes. So I would say that I hate to use the word universe, but it's a big place that's filled with information where everything is connected at the quantum level. All the information is there. And you and anyone else with the guide has got to invent a vehicle to conduct certain sorts of operations within that space. It speeds the whole process up.
Absolutely.
It's almost like an information retrieval modality, you could call it. And you are going to put your own stuff on it, your own personal needs and your identification with certain sorts of archetypes that would be responsible for obtaining certain types of information, if you might, again, I have a policeman. And that's no accident because I do forensic work. So it's like he's the one that helps me deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I'm sure you'll say, like with my guides, I never saw them before. They are archetypes of sorts, a priest, a policeman, a fairy, whatever he is. But they are all types that I have feelings about.
Yes.
And the space between me and them, because I'm not me. I'm, this guy that ran cranes on the waterfront for years. They have different roles here in the 3D, and I didn't get to live their life. I'm already too old to do what they did with their life, but they can enrich me with all of their wisdom, or I can access those forms of wisdom through them as symbols, might be another way to put it.
Yes. Okay. I get it. Well, I'm going to post this up then, because if you don't mind going a little over, John, are you okay with time? Okay. Yeah. Terry Suzuki happens to be a very talented reader, and she's unique in that her channel is called Kigaru Spiritual Journeys. Forgive me, I have allergies, so I'm having an issue. Kigaru Spiritual Journeys. And Terry has the most amazing adventures. And I adore reading with her because when you're around her journeys kind of elevate the reading a bit. And so Terry's making a comment. When I'm reading someone, I see their guides. Not all have a human body. I don't generally parse out what they are. And that's another fascinating asset of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she goes with creatures down into the sea, and she has all of these amazing adventures. And I could listen to her all day. They're wonderful.
Yeah, sounds more like shamanic journeys. And I would say one exercise I learned with Colin Bates, I think, is that we will ask our guides to talk to the sitter's guides. So it's like, my people are going to do lunch with your people. And again, they're comical. So I will get different information from my
Mhm.
guide about you from your guides, because your guides are going
Yes.
to be critical of you, and they're going to have a sense of humor
Oh, yeah.
about you,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're going to talk about the ways that you don't cooperate with the information that they're sending down to you. And so it's like being a step removed. I think
Yes.
the more of these techniques that you can utilize, the more the mediumship and the psychic work fill out, because it gives you slightly different perspectives to gain information through. And it does sound like
Mhm.
this woman that was just on, it sounds like she's really invested in shamanic journeying
Very much
for
so.
sure.
Yes.
Um, and this is one reason I love Western mediumship, is because it really does confine our experience and make it more handleable for someone like me who's kind of a stick in the mud, I would say. I'm coming to this as a straight male from a
Oh, yeah.
business background. Um, and I'm afraid of getting into the netherworld and dropping off and not knowing where I am or how to get back.
Mhm.
Um, but I
Well,
mean,
that
that's a
makes
whole other conversation,
That
I
makes
guess.
common sense, though, because you want, I hate to use this term, stay in your lane, but it's true. Stay where you're comfortable, because that's where you can be the most productive, right? I mean, if you feel the need to reach out, I mean, Terry and I both took a shamanic class, and I found it. That's where I got scrying into the candle. I'd never thought of doing that ever. So I took that class, and that has turned out to be a very valuable tool for me. I don't know why it works so well for me specifically, but I am so grateful. But I do understand what you're saying. Yes, it does, um, it does benefit one to be where they feel the most powerful and most productive and the most familiar at times too. I was going to ask, let's take a look at Kevin's. He just made a comment that he had a major download come to him from an ET about the Earth ascension that I was able to channel through automatic writing. Kind of the same thing I was talking about with just feeling their presence and knowing that they're um, trying to communicate with us. And I just wanted to say, yes, Kevin, well, we see that and we find that to be quite interesting. Okay. And I also want to say that when we're reading, and this is another good question, I'm getting more of my questions answered today than you guys are. Um, when I'm reading other people's guides, so I am, in fact, connecting with these archetypes that are connected to their soul, their spirit, their aura, their beingness. Is that correct then?
I don't know. I don't know how you go about that. I can only speak to what I do. But
Okay, sure.
yeah, you're using the language I was using earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I find that fascinating. I mean, yesterday, was that yesterday? Seems like a year ago. On my show, when I read live, a lady asked me to about her guides, messages from her guides, and it asked their name. And immediately I'm like, oh, it's hard enough to get your own guides' names, much less somebody else. But
And again, they may just be symbols.
they're symbols and
Yeah.
they have a name. Yeah. So I was able to do it because I took away that that logic part of me that says, "Oh, this is so hard, you probably can't do it." But they did come through, and she was satisfied and happy. So there you go. It's
I find that, if you go the Native American route and you go to someone's spirit animal, we don't look for a
yes,
human guide, we look for a spirit animal, which
hmm
again is an archetype. Wolf is not a particular wolf, it is the spirit of wolf. It
absolutely.
is the pack animal, the
Mhm.
hunter, the clever animal that works together in teams. And there is the sense of loyalty with the wolf, and there's also a pride with the wolf. So if
Mhm.
I begin to speak to my sitter as I see the sort of spirit animal amongst
Mhm.
them, which again is symbol, and I start describing those attributes, it immediately starts to funnel into what's going on in their life and how
Yeah.
those energies are prominent in their life right now.
Yes.
So it's a very quick
Fascinating.
way when you're working psychically to get to the heart of the matter with someone. So all of
Mhm.
these techniques can broaden your experience. And as you were talking about the candle earlier, I'd just say that yes, we're all individual. We have different wiring and circuitry. So
Uh,
some physical apparatus are going to work much.
yes.
It's going to be a much more adroit connection for us than
Mhm.
others. And this is why it's great when you're learning all of these things to just cast a broad net,
Yes.
because you could spend years in the wrong place and then find something quite simple.
Mhm.
And you might get angry because you might say, oh, that's so simple. That just comes naturally to me. I didn't
Mhm.
think it could be of value. And then you'll find that's really where you should have been the whole time,
Yes.
because this should have a natural feel as it comes to you, and it makes you hungry and it makes you strong. And
Yes.
it's a cycle that feeds itself. And that's,
Mhm.
again, in answer to the earlier question, it's a big part of the reward, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I absolutely focus in on enjoy, and I'm delighted at the fact that we're all unique. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, and that's apparent in all of creations. You know, you can see a field of tulips, but each one in its own way is unique. And the colors aren't quite the same. We think they are, but they're not. And I love that for the reason that we can't use that. What am I looking for? We can't use that to compare ourselves with each other. We delight, and that's the one thing I love about working with mediums, is that we all delight in each other's skills and journeys, and there's a real love and a connection there because we love and connect with the people that we read, and it's very special. I'm
I would,
enjoying myself.
in that vein of thinking too, in terms of
Yeah.
talking to you, skeptics looking at this or younger people looking at it,
Hmm.
um, with practice, I hope you'll keep in mind a goal of eliminating polar thinking from your
Yes.
experience, because the continuum is huge. And I'll make it practical. Is there reincarnation? Well, people will argue yes and no, and I will say, well, what if some people aren't incarnate and some don't? What if
Hmm.
the universe is vast and more complex beyond our understanding, that we don't know why these things happen, but they happen? Can we just accept it's out there as an imaginary proposition? It
Right.
probably happens in some way, but we don't need to take a position on it and explain it, because then we get wrapped up in ego and it keeps us from feeling the flow of information that's coming
Yes.
when we need to stick to a position.
Yes, I totally agree. Broaden your vision, and know that your journey is your journey. It's unique and it's beautiful. And I love the way you're encouraging young people, because there isn't a whole lot of it. Things are growing. I believe that, and I've spoken of this before, where I feel like the veil is thinning on both sides. They're more able to come through to us because we are raising our vibration, and the veil is thinning on our side as well. So it's important that we keep that journey in mind, the idea of a journey, like you're on a trail and you see something glorious up on the edge of that hill, and you're headed for it, and what happens to you along the way is your unique journey, and then that becomes your unique gift, right? Because someone could get a reading with me and they would have the result of my gifts and my translation and my communication with loved ones on the other side, or their guides, and then have a reading with you and enjoy your specific gifts of communication and speaking with their loved ones on the other side, and guides as well. So it's just too much fun. I'm sorry, I'll go on forever. But we are kind of getting we're getting there. We've been a little over an hour, and it does kind of my cheeks are turning red, as they always do when I start to get worked up. I want to thank everybody that joined us today. Oh, and before I stop though, I have to mention, and maybe you might want to comment on it a little bit, John. You are in the process of writing a book,
Yes.
memoir, The Unfolding Year, My Year as a Psychic Medium. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I try to focus on the experience year by year, because it changes so dramatically from one year to the next in the
Yeah.
development. The
Hmm.
first year, it does hit you like a freight train. If you are, what James would call me, a natural medium, meaning that I was not looking for mediumship, it just
Right.
hit me.
Yeah.
Spirit came to me unannounced, and that sent me reeling. And then, being the kind of pragmatic person I am, I needed to know how big mediumship was. Where
Mhm.
were its borders? Am I one of two mediums in the United States, or are there a million? I had
Right.
no clue. So there
Yeah.
was a ton of learning. The learning curve was like almost straight up for me in that first year. And there are physical and physiological effects that are part of the unfoldment process. And your second year is going to be very different than your first. You're going to be covering different grounds. You've already established a foundation of skills, and there's a lot of things you're not worried about anymore, and that frees you up to explore more areas in depth. And what are your gifts? What is this whole architecture, this place where spirit has intersected matter that creates your soul is unique. So what are your gifts in this field going to be? It's really varied. And finding out what it is that really makes your whole being feel attuned it's a great pursuit. But you've got to work hard to refine it, I want to say. If you really want to be the best at this that you can be, you have to work hard. You have to study hard. You need to get a lot of exposure from different directions. And I know that goes contrary to some teachings that you should only stick with one or two mediumship teachers, because if you get involved in too many systems, you'll get confused. And that's really, I just think that's polar thinking. I'll just say, you're going to come at this as whoever you are and be open to what you're seeing and take what works for you and leave the rest and keep moving.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited about this book. Now, do you have any kind of a time frame? That's really a lame question to ask.
No, I don't. I don't at this point. It's out to agents right now, and I haven't heard back. But hopefully soon. I've been working on a book for 10 years. It wasn't a mediumship book, but it morphed into this. But this has been a continuous effort for 4 years now.
Wow. Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. And please shoot me a line or whatever when it comes out, so that I can spread the word to all the people who were here. And I'm sure they're really wanting to get to know you better. And we'll hope maybe you'll come back on the show sometime and we'll have some more discussions. I found it fascinating.
Oh, sure. We'll have lots of fun. Thank you.
Great. And I just want to give my love to all the people out there in the chat. Thank you for supporting us. And it's really true. Your energy, your vibration, joining with us helps us. It helps elevate us. We're able to communicate better. We're able to read better. We feel your support, and you're very important to us. And I do want to mention, Sun Psychic Jean was in the chat, and hi, Jean. I will be on Jean's channel tomorrow with Jean and Terry Suzuki, and we will be doing mediumship readings. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 3:30 Mountain Time. And go to Jean's channel. I'm sure she's got it advertised on there. So I always love reading with these two ladies. We bounce off of each other, and it's really a lot of fun. So John, my deepest thanks. And I have to say, what an honor and a treat it's been to get to know you and share you with all of the beautiful people in our community.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
You're very welcome. And I'm going to end this show like I always do. To every single one of you out there, don't forget, you are loved beyond measure. Bye, everybody.